With only a handful of days to go before the 2024 presidential election, I sat down with my friend Ruth Ben-Ghiat to discuss how we got here and what we might expect going forward. A professor of history and Italian studies at New York University, Ruth is a scholar on fascism and authoritarian leaders. She's also the author of Strong Men from Mussolini to the Present and the proprietor of the Substack newsletter Lucid. Both are absolutely essential reads for the time in which we're living. Also, I wanted to add that the community Ruth has created over at Lucid is extraordinary and well worth joining. I hope you enjoy this incredible interview as much as I did. So, Ruth, we're 4 days out from, sorry to keep saying this, but it's true, the most consequential important election in American history. And it seems like one of the problems I'm having in processing the way it's unfolding in the final days is that the choices could not be more stark by just about every metric, right? In terms of fitness and the future of the country, et cetera, et cetera. And it's still a coin flip. So I wanted to get your sense of why that might be and what forces are conspiring to either to keep the race close or to give us the illusion that it's close.
Yeah, it is incredible that the choices are so starkly different, and there's so many tragedies occurring right now, such as we have, after 4 years of President Biden and Harris-Biden administration, we have an economy that's, as The Economist said, the envy of the world. And yet millions and millions of Americans are being convinced by Trump and company that America is failing, that the economy is tanking, that America is a garbage heap. And that's very sad. That's just inculcating despair, which is exactly what, authoritarians do. So it's a very particular moment, and it speaks to the fact that the race is so close. A couple of big things. First, the tenacity of Trump and company. Trump's personal skills as a propagandist are very important at keeping up that personality cult, and Fox News is his partner, and the way he's been able to capture the GOP. There's this concept of autocratic capture where an authoritarian turns a party and eventually all the agencies of the state into his personal tool. And so, of course, we have Lara Trump at the RNC. And as we know, the RNC was paying his personal legal bills. Those are examples of capturing, making a party a personal tool. So all of this has paid off. All of the times that GOP elites, down to local officials, because that's important, have trotted in front of cameras and on radio and said his lies. So the party line has been respected remarkably efficiently, got to say, with the aid of right-wing media. So that has contributed to this truly an alternate reality that a lot of the country has been living in, who still think he won the election. And again, that we're a disastrous country teetering on ruin. So there's that. The other big factor is the unwillingness of those who have power, whether it's media or finance, to stand up for democracy and stand up for democratic values and transparency and accountability, and commit to democracy by committing to Harris. And so, the very well-known cases of the unwillingness to endorse anyone, the hedging of the bets of the LA Times and the Washington Post, or it's also short-sighted, the Blackstone CEO, all the people of means and influence who either are speaking out for somebody whose administration would wreck the economy and wreck America's standing in the world, or just hanging back and thus obeying in advance, giving into pressures. That has contributed as well. That's the other big area that has led us to this situation.
Okay, there's so much there. I just, as a quick aside, I want to ask you, because there have been cases where Republican officials actually have spoken out. For example, JD Vance and Donald Trump have been engaging in stochastic terrorism against legal Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, and Republican officials in Ohio have asked them to stop because they're lying and they're endangering people's lives. We saw in the wake of the very dangerous disinformation Donald was spreading after Hurricane Helene, Republican officials were putting out public statements because Donald was misleading people in a way that was making it harder for them to get the help they needed. And
Yes.
yet that doesn't ever seem to get any traction. Is there any explanation for that?
That's the problem. These these people are speaking out, and especially the people working at the local level. We've also heard of police chiefs, speaking out. These people are putting themselves in great danger, and they're not being supported. It should be a front page news that there is this movement of people who I would consider patriots, trying to do their jobs, because somebody like Trump and Vance and company, uh, professionalism and doing your job objectively without politics involved, just out of humanitarianism and professionalism, that is anathema for them. And so we do have the phenomenon of Republicans for Harris,
Yeah.
and that has gotten some attention in the media. But I'm longing for, this is one of the many articles I would like to see on the front page that are showing, that are breaking the illusion of this total control of Trump and company over the party, and honoring these people as patriots. And that's not happening. And there's again, it's this kind of antiquated, broken system, and a mix of caution and burying some of the most important things. Sometimes they do feature the stories, but they put them on, way down on the website or on the 12th page.
Yep.
And that says a lot too.
Now, I've been thinking a lot about this trajectory. Yes, it's an antiquated system, but the fourth estate exists to hold elites feet to the fire, to be in tension with the government, to keep the government honest, et cetera, et cetera. It in the um in an attempt to keep America safe and make democracy stronger, right? And I said America, I meant democracy, to protect democracy and to strengthen democracy. But it seems like the mandate has completely changed. Now we're dealing with corporate media that seems to think that facts and truth don't matter. What matters is being quote unquote fair to both sides. And we've slid even further from that mandate because now it seems to be I can't even, I'm not even sure what it is because it's so mystifying, like as if it's like rude to point out that Donald has cognitive issues, or it's unseemly to put an 80-point font, the most important story of the day, that a candidate for the presidency said that his political opponent, his one of his political quote unquote enemies, should be put in front of a firing squad. How did that happen?
Um, it's it's as though democracy itself has become partisan. And that
Yeah.
is a testament to the strength of the message that has been spewed, that's the correct word,
Mhm.
by and this is part of Steve Bannon's original intention. You fled the zone with you know what.
Bullshit.
And yes, and that plus all the pressure, all the frivolous lawsuits, all the threats, has worked over time, because I've seen this in other countries. It's just our turn to make people get into a state where defending democracy, precisely because we're in this split screen, that's what I call it. We only have two parties, and this is making it immeasurably more difficult for us right now. Other countries have multi-party system. We only have these two. One of them, the Republicans, is gone from democracy. They're aggressively antagonistic, and they want to wreck our democracy and destroy it. And many of them are in alliance with autocrats, and Putin particularly. So if that's the situation, democracy itself becomes a partisan word. Or I'm thought of as a partisan historian because I study authoritarianism. And if I was supposed to give a lecture at the Naval Academy, and it was canceled after a pressure campaign from many GOP members of Congress, because talking about authoritarianism in a negative light is partisan now. Defending democracy explicitly and the values thus of transparency, professionalism, objectivity, accountability becomes partisan. And thus people are pressured into wanting to stay on the sidelines and defend neither of those things. That's where we've gotten, and that's where some of the most influential and richest people, that's where they've taken refuge. And it's not a good place to be.
Democracy itself has become partisan. That's the quote of the decade. Well, so too have facts, it seems. Donald pulled out of the 60-minute interview because they insisted upon fact checking him, as if that
Mhm.
were an inappropriate and insulting. And now he's suing 60 Minutes, sorry, not 60 Minutes, CBS,
Mhm.
which carries 60 Minutes for $100 million. So, welcome to the $100 million lawsuit club, CBS. It's really fun over here. Uh,
Well, autocrats, so it goes way beyond them being masterful liars and getting other people to lie for them. Really, autocrats are so arrogant that they reserve the right, they think, to decide what is truth ultimately. Whatever
yeah.
Putin says is truth has to be truth. And if you're going to say something else, you might fall out of a window. And there's versions of this in all the other autocracies. And so if you think about it, look at all the groups that have come under fire in America. What do they have in common? What does a vaccine scientist have in common with a librarian in Kansas, or a historian, or a prosecutor in DC? All of them depend on a fact-based reality. All of them do their jobs by weighing evidence impartially and operating in an empirically verifiable reality. That is anathema to authoritarians, which is why Trump cannot be fact checked. He's above facts. He decides what facts are. And
Yeah.
this is why, it goes from Mussolini onward. Mussolini's slogan was Mussolini is always right.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw your tweet about that. It said chills down my spine. And it does seem to be that, we've put it in these terms before, that the disease Donald represents has metastasized. And when the Washington Post, at the behest of Jeff Bezos, who owns the paper, refused to allow the editorial board to endorse Kamala Harris. So the paper was not endorsing a candidate in 36 years. We started hearing a lot about anticipatory obedience, but that's been going on, and in many different ways. The revocation of your invitation, for example. We have a national archivist presenting revisionist history so as not to offend white visitors to the exhibits. Just not allowing references to slavery or the way Native Americans were treated in this country, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it seems that uh, there are many, many examples of people already abdicating, whether they need to or not. So is that to me seems to be the most troubling thing in the lead up to Tuesday.
It is, and actually, the Trump campaign has been a rehearsal for autocracy, in which all the bit players and big players have been finding their places, getting ready already to do what will be requested of them. And behind the scenes, all kinds of pressures being placed. Some things come out publicly. Um, and there's, for example, with the military stuff, a third of my book is about coups, and I'm also teaching a class right now about coups. And I'm not saying we are going to have a military coup, but before any kind of authoritarian action, you have to get the institutions and the elites on board,
Right.
because it's no good to have a coup or whatever the heck you're going to do if nobody's prepped for it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what the campaign has been about, both with the normalization of violence, like that rally at Madison Square Garden was to get the foot soldiers into the right mood, so that there's no decency left, all the profanity, all the there's no bottom to this, so that nothing is sacred, anything can be denigrated, anybody can be a target of violence. There's no standards anymore. That's what that was for. But all
Mm-hmm.
the elites have been falling into line. Not all of them, thank God, but
Right.
many of them. So in that sense, it's been a rehearsal for autocracy. And I actually think that the Harris-Walz campaign has been an experience in finally starting a pro-democracy movement in our country. So that's my big picture view as this campaigns come to an end.
So that's a positive thing, pro-democracy, hooray. Because remember, everybody, there is only one party of our two major parties that believes in democracy anymore, and that's the Democratic Party, represented by Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. So just one last question, because I want to end up on a hopeful note, and I know, I have no idea what's going to happen on Tuesday. I don't want to. I mean, I think Kamala Harris has to win because I refuse to believe that we're going to go the other direction. That doesn't mean she's going to. But first of all, I think it's good to point out that after the election, either way, President Biden is still president and he's in charge of everything. So that's
Yeah.
good. But in the event that Kamala Harris becomes president, what is the most crucially important thing people need to remember if we want to stop fighting our rear flank against fascism and maybe push this country forward in a better way?
That unity and solidarity, privately and publicly, are very, very important. Um, the Republicans for Harris has been really important during the campaign, um, because MAGA has to be, it has to be marginalized, and so having a big tent, just as Trump from 2016 on made a big tent for all racists and extremists of every
Right.
sort, we need to consciously, build on this kind of pro-democracy movement and reaffirm what our values are. And Kamala Harris is the living embodiment of those values, and her campaign has put them into practice. I was very pleased to see the accent on positive emotions, because I've written about this in the resistance chapter of my book, that joy and hope and optimism are actually part of successful pro-democracy strategies, because authoritarians want you to become hopeless, and feel that there's no point in struggling against them, that they're omnipotent, the strongmen. And successful pro-democracy movements, think about Poland in 2023, they had the March of a Million Hearts. They literally had a heart as their logo, and that was successful for them. So the campaign has opened the door to giving us giving us an introduction to the kinds of rhetoric and practices, including, being out, solidarity with others, the care economy, practices of care that we will need going forward to make our democracy more robust.
I think that's an amazing point to end on, and I'm so glad you brought that up because it does feel like we've been living on that very narrow bandwidth of human emotion and experience that Donald Trump has spent his entire life, and it's not a good, productive place to be, and I think you're right. Kamala Harris has given us permission to be out in the sun again. So, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, my friend, it is such a pleasure to speak with you, just right before what is going to be a fairly harrowing day. So I know you're really busy, so thank you so much for taking the time.
And thank you, Mary, for everything you're doing.
Hey, everybody. In case you weren't aware, I am spectacularly bad at self-promotion. So here it goes. Please subscribe to our channel and like and share our videos. Your support means so much to all of us. Thank you.